Alright, so this is going to be a video on aristocrats and bureaucrats. So, there was an incident today where I saw a service worker complaining about having to clean toilets. And one of the people that they clean toilets for in the building decided to really lay on the vitriol towards this person for complaining about doing it. And I was like, okay, I don't like that he complains a lot of the time about it and is really miserable and upset and so on. And it upsets me too, but I'm not angry at him for being annoyed while cleaning toilets. And I don't think that it was right for the other guy to really rail him with antagonism and so on for doing something for that guy while unhappy about the shitty situation, let's say. um, so I gave the guy like 7 cigarettes who was cleaning and so on. And it occurred to me that I've been kind of acting like an aristocrat, like a good aristocrat, while on welfare. And I realize that lays to the welfare queen thing and so on. But I have not been idle trying to earn a living. This YouTube channel was my big attempt to get a following and so on and earn money, and then I could be wealthy and well off and comfortable and like responsible and like have like an effort based reward system and so on. But apparently I'm not that great at it, so welfare it is. But while I'm on welfare, I can give a little bit to the occasional person who's really struggling at the right time to give them a perk when they're really needing something. And that's the aristocrat, the thing that we like about aristocrats, is they're not systematized, they're responsive to the situation. Different situations call for different outcomes and so on. And what that means is you need to have a decent character to actually be good for doing that, and a little bit of worldly wisdom and so on. Maybe not worldly in the Christian sense, but in the typical sense. A little bit of knowledge of the ins and outs of various things and so on, and how it feels and so on, to be a good aristocrat of sorts. Noblesse oblige, nobles oblige. And at the same time, I'm also on welfare. So the truth is, I'm not living like the high life compared to most people, but I am living acceptably comfortably, more or less, to the point that I can actually afford to give a little charity to people who are homeless because I have housing. You know, and it's literally as simple as I have housing. I can buy food that requires cooking, which is a lot cheaper than buying pre-made food. So I have a little bit of spare money that the homeless don't necessarily have. And it occurred to me that something dawned on me that is like, literally, it was like, if I keep this pattern of generosity or magnanimity up towards other people, and another thing I do is, typically speaking, I'll give like a $3 to $5 tip on like $15 of food from a fast food joint or something like that. If I keep this pattern of behavior up and I get more money, then I can afford to be even more generous to more people and still have more left over for myself on top of it. Like that's the There's a Faisal, or not Faisal, Ali, Abi, Adi, Abdi. I can't remember his name, but there's a character in Lawrence of Arabia, the movie, that says, like, I am the terror of the Arabian Peninsula. I have like 500 warriors under my belt. Everyone bows to me. They give me a tribute, yet I am poor because I am a river to my people. And it's like, okay, that's like the essence of an aristocrat when they're truly noble in the best sense of the word. They're the best, and that means they are the best. It doesn't mean they suck at something particularly hard and they're good at other things. It means they're the best all around. Right? Like, you know what I mean? And the thing is, I'm not saying this is like unique to rich people or poor people or something like that, but it is a lot harder to be generous when you're starving. You know what I mean? Um, so there's an argument there. And then on the flip side of it, of this aristocrat bureaucrat thing, is some people are so dysfunctional that they require consistent care by society. Now, sometimes that means monthly payments of a certain amount of money. Sometimes that means, like, if they're uh, physically disabled, they need someone to literally wipe their ass. If they're chronically addicted, they might need someone to keep them sober by checking up on them and so on. Um, it's there's a variety of different situations. Um, for the most part, one wants to keep the dependency nature minimal. But one has to acknowledge that there are people that cannot take care of themselves properly in some sense. Now, I'm the kind of person that can't take care of themselves in regards to earning money very good. Like, I used to, when I was really young, I tried my best to work minimum wage jobs and I kept screwing them up and stuff like that all the time, and so on. Didn't last very long in that. So I switched to doing newspapers and being on disability and so on. And it's literally just I was so autistic and like I had PTSD from childhood and like I hadn't gotten over it yet because I was just a young adult and like still forming and so on. And like um generally it was a good system, but I was one of those that was going to fall through the cracks. Um you might not sense it in me necessarily, but I am not good at technical skills. I can vibe meta positions and so on really easily, but the actual technical foundational skills for things are really difficult for me to learn. Like, I can understand program architecture and move through it intuitively, but like if I look at like a line of code, it's like break in, break out, or something, and then like line, and then like code, and then I just like there's like only like four or five terms, and like my brain hurts from trying to understand it. For like looking at it for like 3 minutes or 5 minutes or something. Like it's like, oh my god, my head is just overwhelmed. So it's like I've always been sort of autistic, idiot savant in this regards. It's sort of a those who can't do teach kind of moment in a way. Except I do have a very small amount of formal training in not formal training, practice in lawn work and painting houses and a little bit of carpentry, just a little fix up with the garage roof or like railings or like fences or something. And that kind of thing. But if you ask me my positions on the general trends of like politics or philosophy or culture or something like that. It's just like, oh yeah, bang, 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 done, 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 analysis, analysis, analysis. Um, it's just who I am as a person, basically. Very INTP behavior, basically. Um, so for me, I am not a good regular worker, but I might be a good teacher, just naturally, dispositionally, and also a good leader in some situations. Depends on the situation. In my previous video, I mentioned my version of video game socialism and video game capitalism or something. I think I have more emphasis on gamer bro socialism on my part than in that video than gamer bro capitalism. But if you watch that video, then you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about, basically. So the bureaucrat is important for people that will fall through the cracks of regular charity, but you want to minimize it. People on it, basically. Um, and maximize people rising to the occasion and challenge to deliver the goods, so to speak. And you want to reward people for their hard work, that it's productive, and so on. And so on. And you want to be gentle as much as possible in correcting mistakes, typically, unless it's something you have to break away from them completely on. And even then, let them off a little easy in a certain sense, too. That sort of thing. And the argument for aristocracy is precisely that a mere system of flowcharts for decision making in all situations is not necessarily the most judicious or efficient application of generosity or charity, and so on. So, like, for instance, and it can be a combination of bureaucracy and aristocracy, that's allowed. You can have well-off people doing the occasional charitable giving strategically while they're well off, to people who need something to brighten up their day a little bit that day or something like that. And it doesn't have to be just for people on welfare or poor people entirely or something like that. You know what I mean? It could be like just a sort of like, oh, hey, how's it going? Why don't you unload your mind on me today? Or like, hey, I'll buy you a cup of coffee and we can talk things over or something. Like those kinds of things that most people can get by with just those things because they can earn their money just fine, more or less. Maybe they get a Christmas bonus or something like that. You know, and so on. And it's a very interpersonal relationship, the aristocrat. The bureaucrat is there as the final safety net. The aristocrat is there for everyone else. That's my stance on welfare and charity, basically. And the aristocrat is also there for those who fall between the cracks of their typical aristocracy, charitability, being super helpful. So you can be an aristocrat, and that's primarily good enough for everyone except the poorest. And you can be a bureaucrat and provide basic welfare for the poorest. And then the aristocrats can also provide strategic or tactical charity to maximize well-being in the moment, efficiently and effectively, um, based on the actual need in the situation, based on judgment and discernment, with an eye towards love and kindness and compassion, and a personal relationship with the giver and the receiver. There's a human element to it. And the bureaucracy is there to say, okay, you don't go below this level, basically, and so on. Um, it's you know, both can be important in my experience. Now, I've kind of gotten a new aspiration today to become an aristocrat of sorts, get rich, get famous, and so on. But I'm never going to forget the lessons I've learned and lose the character I have in regards to charitability. I'm never going to say, I'm never going to be like, it's all mine, I earned it, me, you know. Um, but I have had a certain weird life experience of like I'll give you, okay, so this is like, okay, I got a bit of a conviction that God's preparing me to become an aristocrat, an influential and wealthy person, basically. I don't know if it's just delusions of grandeur or something like that. But I've always had this drive to be a leader and be good for my people and so on. So maybe that's partly what it is. Maybe it's just a subconscious sort of like, oh, you got to be this. Um, a great man of history, so to speak. And I don't mean just like, oh, I conquered everyone, but I mean like a river, being a river to my people, which means the water of life in some sense. You know, you know, obviously Jesus is the water of life to the rest of us, but I mean I can be a subsidiary river to my people. Um, and basically, when I was like 3 years old, I was getting so hungry at times that I tried to cook my own eggs because I was living in that poor of a condition. And then when I was 4, I got transferred to a 3-story house under my dad instead of my mom. And I got taught the art of manliness and courage and combat and earning your way and so on, with a little bit of temper tantrum problems and a little bit of I don't want to call it sadism or necessarily cruelty, but it's sort of like an aspect of cruelty to it in a very mean world syndrome kind of way. And then I lived with my grandparents for a while and so on, and I learned the the um, gentler side of being so wealthy you can afford a maid and earning money and having the high quality food and so on, while also having a lot of intellectual wisdom and so on. And then in adult life, I sort of did the usual basement dweller, video games, couch bro, video game bro lifestyle for a couple of years, and then I lived on $100 a week or month or 2 weeks or months. Can't remember exactly. I think it was like $75 every 2 weeks or something. And hot dogs were like $3 for a pack, so like it wasn't entirely bad, but I didn't have to pay rent or utilities or internet. I had those provided and so on. So I was just barely getting by, with minimal goodness. But I was sufficient for surviving. Um, and then I got on welfare and disability and so on after living with my mom again for a little bit, and that didn't work out. And because I was so heavily traumatized and like abused as a child and so on, that was like it was kind of like being a Harkonnen, if you know what I mean. Kind of, in a way. But it was also like being in Atreides, in with my grandparents. And then I learned what it was to live on welfare and disability and so on, and do odd jobs and chores and service the do paper routes some more, and just get by doing political online activism and like being a bit of a wokester and so on and socialist, and being afraid of fascism and sensing the decay of society and so on. So it's like, okay, I used my intellectual, because my grandfather was an anthropologist and my grandmother was a biologist. So it was like, okay, I got a bit of a teaching in that regards. And my dad was a programmer and an architect and a mechanic and a plumber and a carpenter and a lawn caretaker. And my childhood home with my dad was like used to be a farm, and we got the main part of it. So we had like fruit trees, and there were gardens and the other with the neighbors, and we could trade fruit and vegetables with each other and stuff. But it was a big yard, good for sports and growing up as a kid and so on, but a big backyard. But it was a lot of work to maintain, basically. So, like, I learned some the values of home care and so on. But anyways, when I was on welfare initially and so on, I was basically just coasting, doing my political activism and so on, and trying to educate people as much as I could on the ins and outs as much as I could of the various political and cultural dimensions so that they make wise calls and spread the word, and like we could have a stronger society through more wisdom throughout society and high depths of wisdom in the elites of society and so on. Harmonizing the society basically. And then I got a girlfriend for a little bit, and I was like, oh, woman, that's the thing. I forgot about that. Because I was a virgin until 30. I wasn't even looking for a woman for like 11 years. And I wasn't looking for a woman when I got one either. She basically fell into my lap. So I lucked out in a way. But, like, you know. However, I lost her really quickly. And then I became poorer and poorer to the point of homelessness and, like, doing drugs harder and harder for a little while. Until I became homeless. And had, like, nightmares about gods tormenting me and so on. Like, absolute peak despair. And then eventually I found my current location and moved in. And things started to look up, and they still are, a little bit, in a way. But the bureaucracy welfare system is not so strong as it once was, despite the higher taxation. And what I want to say is the big thing that I found is my relations with other people is the primary salvation I've experienced. Now, a lot of the people I'm around in the building I'm in have lived relatively strong lives, working hard and so on. And they're just really infirm in their old age due to work injuries and stuff like that. But they've got a lot of adventurous stories to tell and life experiences and so on. So I've been learning from them and like being a good neighbor with them and um enjoying my life a little bit with them and so on, and like kind of come to identify with them. Now, of course, when I say I think I might be destined to become an aristocrat, that obviously represents a bit of a separation from living in a bit of a slum, and so on. And even if I were to, I don't know what's going to happen in the future exactly, but like if I keep up relations with these people who've been there for me, and I've kind of been there for them, and we get along and stuff like that. Um, if I become an aristocrat, there'll be a bit of a separation of sorts between us. And I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, okay, do I really want to become an aristocrat? It's like I would like extra money. That would be nice. Um, you know, I'm not the poorest person, thankfully, but I'm I could use more money. Being a little famous would be kind of cool in a way. Um, what else? Um, having children would be nice. So, yeah. Now, some of these people have already had children, and they're just getting on in years and so on. But a part of my heart tugs on me and says it's not fair that they don't have children and I might in the future. You know what I mean? And yet at the same time, I can't help but wanting children of my own. So that would instill a sense of duty in me if I do become an aristocrat to serve the needs of my people as a leader and influence so that they can maximize so that I can just sort of minorly intervene and cultivate through careful pruning of really bad behavior and encouragement of good behavior or something, or attitudes or ways of looking at things and so on that are helpful as opposed to unhelpful, for them to find or create what's good for them that they can enjoy. Um, and the reason why I think I might become an aristocrat in the future is I'm and also give a hand up or a handout, like a hand up basically through a handout, not just advice but like also like the occasional gift or something or charity or something like that when someone's hurting or needs something extra, particularly that moment or something. um, to um, be the ordering principle in a certain degree, not the top, but like a higher level than them, of people to a degree. Some people. And that means sort of like YouTube influence or fame and fortune a little bit. That means maybe having like a maid if I get a big house, and paying them well and maybe giving them Christmas bonuses too. And that means tipping waiters and people who don't deliver the food but like have a tip jar at the front of their pizza shop or something. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of behaviors. Sort of like um, sort of like a privileged existence, wealth distributor through my situational awareness of who needs it the most at any given situation, and just little bits of it consistently though, you know. And if that's my version of aristocracy, then that is something I actually don't mind being if I can get it, for the comfort while still not losing myself to wealth, power, honor, and privilege, or pleasure, fame and fortune, basically. And I would guess that if I'm correct about this, I'm being molded and fashioned to be an ideal aristocrat in the future. It could be delusions of grandeur. I might always be on welfare for the rest of my life, and so on. But I feel like I'm being trained by God for something bigger than just being a welfare bum that no one cares what the opinions of are. Now, it might just be my delusions, and maybe I've always just kind of gravitated towards an aristocratic vibe in terms of my desires, and I'm practicing to be an aristocrat when I'm never going to be one or something. But the spooky experiences with God, when I take them into correlation with the fact that um, God seemed to make certain promises through my friends and family a little bit, and a lot of the painful aspects have come true. However, it didn't destroy me, and God's continually rescued me from my own failures over and over and over and over again. And He's keeping me going through all this misery and poverty and stuff like that while I develop my character. There's two archetypes that might make sense in my regards. I don't know if this is true. Again, this might be delusions of grandeur. But in a certain sense, There's a character in Song of Ice and Fire that comes up in the fifth book, and Varys is his backer, and basically the Griffin or the Prince Griffin or whatever his name is, not Griffith, by the way, um, is in the fifth book, Song of Winter or something, or Dance of Dragons or Winds of Winter. I can't remember what the fifth book name is. I think it's the Dance of Dragons. And he's basically raised to understand the ins and outs of living poor so that he's a better ruler and like he's like objectively a good man because he's worked hard his entire life and he's known he's got this destiny for kingship, but he's learned to live as just a poor fisherman and so on, and lived all the experiences of like the various types of poor people in different positions and situations and jobs and so on. So he's born to rule, but he's being trained as a poor person, as well as learning the ins and outs of the higher topics and higher education and combat and courage and strategy and tactics and politics and faith and philosophy and psychology and so on. If I become a bit of an aristocrat in some sense in this life, then basically that prince in exile, the prince in exile, teaching is what I'm going through. It's sort of like the King Arthur or King David approach to a good master or ruler, um, in a way, and it's also the prince in exile as well. Like they're two different tropes in a sense, but they got some similarities going on where they're destined for future greatness, but first they have to learn the little people's lives by living it themselves. And in and keep in mind also, this is only a thought that came to me like 2 or 3 hours ago when I was looking back on this stuff, and like I was like, oh yeah, Dune, that's a movie, that's a book, you know. But I was thinking about it, I was like, oh, maybe that's what's going on with me, because I remember something about me supposedly being an aristocrat, and also something about me getting the good life miraculously delivered, and like, why would God save my life 46 times? And then, like, constantly deliver little uh, packages, little charities consistently right at the moment I need them, like 30 times in a month, some months. You know what I mean? Like, it's like kind of freakish, but like, you know, it's like exactly what I was asking for, and I didn't ask anyone else, they just gave it to me. I asked God, and then someone else gave it to me. Basically, you know, and it was like, oh well, thanks God, thanks and thank you that person. You know, God working through that person. You know, you thank both of them basically. It's not one or the other. You know. Yeah, and this is like the you know, and I've not always been up to snuff in regards to this stuff. But God is training me to be good at this sort of thing and to have the proclivity of this particular method and aspect and attitude and approach and so on. And he also seemed to have promised that me and my ex-girlfriend would become a YouTube couple. So it's like, okay, well, if you're a YouTuber and you're rich, then that means you get a lot of viewers. And they give money, probably through donations, because they appreciate whatever it is on YouTube that you're doing, and so on. So that means like helpfulness. And I wasn't thinking about aristocracy or anything like that before, but at the same time, I had a certain like I'm an aristocrat in the making kind of attitude underlying everything I was doing, I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to be rich and famous and influential and powerful, I better be responsible for the well-being of those under me. And I was like, okay, you know. And basically, what this means is what this means is that I am going to have lived a life, even with my fame and fortune that I get in the future, that no one's going to look at what it took to get there and say, oh, he just got it received on a silver platter, he's a nepotism baby or something. The exact mechanism I get rich and famous, if I get rich and famous, is probably going to be some real magical BS, bologna sandwich, bullshit, miraculously and so on in a sense. But they're going to look at all my life experiences and so on and develop it up until that point and go kind of like, well, from a karma sense, he's earned it, even if the exact mechanism is kind of a miracle in a sense. And I believe that's what's going to happen. I don't know for sure. Maybe I'm just hopium, injecting hopium into my eyeballs or something. But it's kind of a thought that pleases me and tickles my fancy and so on. But it wasn't one I dared to think of until now, basically. So I was just cultivating my best self as best as I could beforehand, because I was like, oh well, if I don't, I'm damned to hell, and like I'm on thin ice with God. And now it's kind of like I'm looking at it and going kind of like, huh. I wonder if he was just letting me feel that way so that I know how other people feel when I get rich and famous and comfortable and secure. Um, you know, so I've lived high, I've lived low in various ways, and up and down the ranks of society and experiences and so on. And if I do get rich and famous, it's probably going to be by demonstrating the wisdom gained from being a low life and living the high life, and being an aristocrat and living the peasant life, so to speak, in all its dimensions, basically, or a lot of them at least. Um, I remember when I was a young child, I wanted to become a politician so I can make rousing speeches and excite the inner fire in the hearts of mankind and so on. Um, but I lost that interest around the time I got on welfare. Um, because the truth is, when I say I might become an aristocrat in the future by a miracle, I'm not saying I'm going to be an officially powerful person. In fact, the YouTube thing does actually make me excited because it means I'll have influence without formal power over other people for the most part, except for my family, basically. You know, like raising children or something. Nothing too hard. You know, I joke that raising children is so easy a caveman can do it. Yeah, like okay, maybe it's not that easy, but technically a caveman can do it. You know, um, it's a bit of a joke on the. I think it's a car insurance thing. It's like car insurance, so easy a caveman can do it. Like Geico or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, um, if I am blessed with this higher development, I will begin to put together Once I'm successful, because I'll have that experience, which is kind of critical because I need something that other people will look at and go, "Oh, it worked for him. Okay, maybe it'll work for me." That kind of advertising, as opposed to just being a welfare bum and like going, "Oh, this is the good life. This is the patrician way to do things." While I'm on welfare, that's not very convincing. Um, um, when I'm successful, if I'm successful, then I'll start coming up with solid, concrete principles and foundations for maximizing your well-being and becoming like societally an aristocrat virtuously and skillfully, um, through what's worked for me, basically. If I become successful, I'll do it when I'm successful, basically, not because I'm gonna be like, I want to have good things or else I won't do good things, but because like literally it's like no one's gonna believe me, it's the path to the good life until I get the good life. And also, I don't actually know if I'm right until I do get the good life. So it's like, okay, um, and I don't know if that's real, if that's going to happen or not, but I'm hoping it happens. And you can see Jordan Peterson is kind of this way, but he lost himself. He lost himself. And I think I'm going to be the version that can gracefully enter an aristocratic position and maintain themselves. Or at least God maintains them. Um, and they maintain their family and their underlings and their society and so on. Um, it's sort of like um, I'm not entirely sure about this. I'm not 100%, but maybe it's the case. I mean, the heart hope springs eternally, basically. um, but yeah, I'll leave it there. But basically, like you look at the distributist, you look at Sargon of Akkad, you look at Orrin McIntyre, probably. You look at PewDiePie. You look at um, maybe Nick Freitas, Doug Wilson. You look at Andrew Clavin. You look at these people and you go, okay, they earned their well-being. They're self-made men, so to speak. But half of them basically don't believe in self-made men. They believe that God cultivates you into a position that God wants you in, and you have responsibilities and duties to your fellow man that you can better do when you have more. And there's a responsibility and so on. And Jordan Peterson is not a complete failure in this regard. I just think that he was overwhelmed by the various celebrity um, issues that suddenly struck him uh, when he got famous and rich. Um, so I don't think he was ready for it, basically. And I think it kind of crashed him a little bit, and that's what some of the ego a little bit might have been about, and so on. And I'll finish with a movie reference, which is um, basically the common human experience. Like, there's untold tales of poor people who are basically working for a living and barely making it, and then they win the lottery, and then it destroys them, and there's financial discipline and everything else. So to the point that they just eat all the money they got, the millions of dollars they got within like 5 years, and are like homeless and don't have a job anymore either. So they're even worse off than before. And the movie reference is in the movie Conan the Barbarian, where it says, "Success can test a man as harshly as failure." And it's got a little montage of that going on, basically, and so on. And I think the reason why I'm being so strictly prepared is so that I can weather that if I become an aristocrat or influential and sort of wealthy or something like that, and so on. But I do have a little taste of it already. But I know some of what it means to be in that direction a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, and still responsible. I just haven't experienced the blessings of wealth, particularly yet, outside of my gamer bro, just work at a gas station kind of uh, don't have to pay rent because I'm living at my parents' house, kind of spending sprees and money, uh, using money like crazy for uh, energy drinks or alcohol or weed or cigarettes or junk food and so on when I was like 20 to 23. The party lifestyle. As an irresponsible young adult, basically. Um, so I know a little bit about the various aspects to all these things, and I just don't know how to put them together in a way that can get me to the point that I want to be at. But I'm saying there's a possibility that God will provide me wealth and honor and pleasure and power in a way, in a bit of a miracle maybe, but it's not like I haven't earned it in the cosmic sense, if you know what I mean. I mean, technically you can't earn good things from God in the cosmic sense either, according to Christianity, but you know what I mean, the usual sense of that way of saying it. In a sense, I'm earning it through karma, what other people earn through cause and effect, and so on. I don't know if that's true. That might be just delusions of grandeur, basically. I am a little schizo in some ways, at least nowadays. But it's a pleasant story, and I can sort of see how it's possibly true. And if I do get it, then I'll bend my will towards providing a foundational principles of the aristocratic mentality that leads towards good success and so on. And it won't be a be all end all necessarily. It'll be more like a primer on like like if you got the basic work ethic down, then like these little extras will sort of help you grow into a leadership position where you're not the one doing the hard work. You're the one who's instructing people on how to do it as easily as possible while still being effective, because you've done it before. You've put your time in the trenches so you can lead the troops from now, basically. That's the kind of principle that I'm talking about. And yeah,